Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of fantasyforesight.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It is Thursday, July 9th, and we have got a very exciting, very unique episode for you tonight on Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. As you may or may not know, both at Foresight Jay and at Foresight Ben, myself, are in Scott Fishbowl 10F SFBX, and we couldn't be more excited about it. We are going to go through the roster settings, the scoring format, and Jay's and my draft to this point, where Jay has gotten himself through 12 rounds and I have gotten through 14. So we have got a lot of guys to cover, and we've got our guy at FF_encyclopedia, Steve, to keep us both honest tonight. How you doing tonight, Jay?
Good, Ben. I'm a little afraid of Steve after the last few podcasts and seeing how critical he's been about some of the picks and some of the positions. I'm a little afraid of what he's going to think about my roster. But like you said, Ben, very exciting time. I think we're both very excited to be a part of Scott Fishbowl 10. We were also very honored to be sponsors. Fantasy Foresight actually sponsored 2 segments of the Podathon starting last Sunday into Monday. And it was great. We had some marquee spots, and very honored to be able to support such a great cause. So we are looking forward to it. Steve, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing awesome, guys. All I have to say is closing out a third quarter as an accountant at work. So I'm just happy to be down in my basement with the kids upstairs and just everything shut out except fantasy football. And this will be a lot of fun to talk about. And I already see some players on both your rosters I love and some I don't so much. So
I can't wait to hear about all that.
Before
we dive into our rosters, the Scott Fishbowl format is quite a unique one. It is a 22-player roster that consists of 11 starters and 11 bench players. There's no kickers, no defenses, no trades. I mean, it's not quite a best ball draft, but it's pretty close to a best ball draft where you have to set your lineup. And, you know, it has a super flex spot, and then it has 3 standard flex spots. So if you're not familiar, the super flex can be a running back, wide receiver, tight end, or quarterback, which is what most people tend to opt for in that spot. And the other 3 flex spots are your standard running back, wide receiver, tight end, your typical flex. So it's you have to start every week 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 3 regular flexes, and 1 super flex. The scoring format consists of 6 points for passing touchdowns. Now, touchdown to interception ratio matters a ton in this league because interceptions are -4 points. And if you throw a pick 6, that's another -2, and it wipes out any other prior touchdown that person might have accounted for. It's 1 point per 25 pass yards. That's standard. 2 points for a 2-point conversion. You lose 1 full point per sack. And again, accuracy really matters in this league because you lose 1 point per incompletion. You get a half point per completion to kind of offset that. But man, some of these dink and dunk quarterbacks all of a sudden have a little bit more appeal in a format like this because of their high accuracy numbers. Rushing is pretty standard. 6 points per rushing touchdown, 1 point for every 10 rush yards. A 2-point conversion is 2 points. And then you get 1/2 of a point for every rushing first down. They would also get receiving credit. So this applies to wide receivers or running backs as well. 6 points per receiving touchdown, 1 point per 10 receiving yards, 2 points for a 2-point conversion, 1/2 point for a receiving first down, and 1/2 point per reception. Tight ends are the same exact as wide receivers, except for 2 things. Instead of 1/2 point per reception, they get a full point per reception, and instead of 1/2 point per receiving first down, they get a full point per receiving first down. So it is also a tight end premium super flex league. And any player that returns a touchdown of any kind or a fumble recovery for a TD also gets 6 points. That's pretty standard. So you've got an idea of the roster. You've got an idea of the scoring settings, very unique. Definitely never played in a league quite like this before with all of these nuances. And the way that we're going to do this is first Jay's going to walk us through his draft picks 1 through 12. And then Steve and I will get an opportunity to react. And then we're going to do the same thing with mine. So Jay, go ahead and kick it off, brother. You were drafting out of the 110 spot. Not too happy about that, were you?
I wasn't too happy about that. Now I'm in the Thundercats division. We got to choose our division if you had a choice. So I went with the theme this year. There's a theme every year in this competition. The theme this year is toys. So I went with the Thundercats. A lot of great competitors, are a lot of friends of the show actually in the division. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, picking out of the 10 spot was really difficult in this format because there are a lot of high-end players going very early in the draft, and I just didn't have a crack at any of them. So really, any strategy that I was hoping for entering this competition or entering this draft just had to go out the window. Really, how I ended up approaching this was just taking what the draft gave me. So here we go, guys. Let's see what you think. With my first selection at the 110. Now, you got to understand. CMC, Saquon, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Ezekiel Elliott, Alvin Kamara, Travis Kelce, George Kittle all went right off the bat. So like Ben said, super flex, tight end premium, elite running back, all the first to go. The one thing I did like was friend of the show, Travis Sumter, did take Dalvin Cook, which opened the door for me to take Michael Thomas, the #1 wide receiver in fantasy with the 10th overall selection. He was the WR1 in points per game in this format last year. So, not going to crush me too bad for going wide receiver in a Superflex tight end premium draft after the high-end guys all went, right?
I mean, nobody was crying harder about your draft pick than you, because I know you wanted future Hall of Famer Pat Mahomes more than anything in the world at that spot. But you can't argue with Michael Thomas. Like you said, at a certain point, you just got to take what the draft gives you. You are required to start 3 wide receivers every single week, and you've got the best one, period. You did what you could.
Hey, real quick, if you're watching along on Sportscaster, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you're watching, my draft is now here. There you are. All right, now you can follow along.
So I have a little bit of homework for you guys, actually. For the next time we get together and do a podcast, I want you to come back with the answer to this. Where did Jameis Winston finish in this format? Looking at the quarterback scoring. So I'm just curious.
Oh, yeah. With the interceptions and the pick sixes, Steve.
And the incompletions, just chucking it up to Mike Evans for the heck of it.
And Ben brought up the point. The efficiency in quarterbacks is very key because there are a lot of quarterbacks that will score negative points in a week. And that's the difference between winning and losing your matchup.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, too, when you think about it as far as a super flex goes, because typically you want to start 2 quarterbacks, but I wouldn't want to just roll out somebody who's a turnover machine or, could score you negative points. I would rather have, multiple extra stud wide receivers. So, the Michael Thomas pick's a good, it's a good pick. Lamar and Mahomes are off the board. I mean, first round, you have a guy that could potentially be in that 140 reception range. So can't really argue too much with that.
I'm glad you brought that up too. There are a lot of chats going on in relation to this draft. There are chats for like all of the number 10 draft pick spots, which is a huge group. But, a lot of people were having that discussion where, I need a quarterback, but why would I pick a quarterback who could potentially score me negative points when I can have this same other field player who has, roughly the same average scoring points, but has 0 chance of scoring me negative points if I trot him out there. So I'm going to go with that safer play. Both have similar average scoring, but this guy, the field player, is much safer week to week than me trotting out there some quarterback who could end up costing me. So, I mean, exactly to your point, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so because I'm in the 10th spot, I get to circle back pretty quickly in my draft. So coming back to the 203, after I picked, actually there has been a challenge going around where if you take some terrible player in the first round of the draft, you make the playoffs, then people are donating to help raise funds for charity, and it's a great cause. So one of those individuals in my league ended up taking part in that challenge. He selected Matt Barkley with the 11th selection in the first round.
That explains it.
Hey,
because I saw that on Twitter.
It's
I was like, did he mean Saquon? And I clicked the wrong button.
It really is fantastic because, listen, he gets to do a great thing for charity. I get to support him financially while also not compromising my team. So I really feel like this is a win-win situation. I can support the charity and still have a shot at this thing. So because of that, Drew Brees, Joe Mixon go off the board. Miles Sanders goes off the board super early. And again, that leaves it open to me. All these running backs and quarterbacks are dropping. So I go Davante Adams in the second round as my WR2. So I have Michael Thomas, Davante Adams, arguably the two best wide receivers in fantasy football, both on my team to start my draft.
I mean, I'm not sure there's a scarier duo, in my opinion, at the wide receiver position heading into 2020 than Michael Thomas and Davante Adams. I mean, none of us would be surprised if Michael Thomas just kept on keeping on this season, and we all expect, unless there's going to be some renaissance of Devin Funchess or Mr. Lazard takes a massive step, it's going to be, just all Davante Adams all the time. So again, I know, going through this format with you, talking to you before the draft, I know this is not your preferred start, but sometimes, again, you just have to take what the draft gives you. And if you're going to make me load up with the best two wide receivers that we're projecting this season, all right, fine, I'm going to twist my arm.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I look at Adams, it's like his range of outcomes does include being the wide receiver one in fantasy football. So it's like, would you prefer to have that on your roster, or just because you feel pressured to take a running back? Because I'm sure, Jay, you're like, well, I'm not picking again for a minute. It's going to start drying up even more than it already is. But do you reach on a guy or take a higher risk running back over a guy who could finish wide receiver one? So I think you definitely made the right call, took what the draft gave you. And when you look at the roster makeup, you only do have to start two running backs at the end of the day. Right, so there's a lot of flex spots. You can put, plenty of wide receivers in there. So, yeah, I don't think you could pass up on Adams to try to grab a Josh Jacobs or something,
Steve,
player of that nature.
Honestly, repeatedly in this draft, that's the exact position I found myself in. Was there's a run on quarterback, run on running back, run on tight end, because those are always the focus. Running back in general, but especially quarterback and tight end just in this format. And so I kept finding these incredible values falling to me, and it's like, do I reach for one of these other positions just to fill it, or do I take the outstanding player that is available to me, and do I just go with the best available? So with that being said, in the third round, again, I start with wide receiver, and after I take Davante Adams, it's another run of quarterback, running back, to the point that Kyler Murray goes in the second round. Okay? Kyler Murray goes in the second round. And Steve, like you said, Josh Jacobs goes right in front of Kyler Murray in the second round. It's everybody. So when it comes back around to me, I end up going, what do I take? Do I reach on a running back that I don't necessarily love, or a quarterback that I don't necessarily have a lot of confidence with at this point? I can wait and get something just as good later. So I end up taking Mike Evans at the 310 and going wide receiver. Mike Evans, wide receiver 3. So I am definitely heavy on the wide receiver mark at this point.
I mean, again, we have to start 3 wide receivers in this format. And by my records, you have your wide receiving core in this format last year in terms of points per game You have the wide receiver 1, the wide receiver 4, and the wide receiver 6. That's ridiculous.
I hope it works out that way again this year. But, you know, Evans was available, but actually Godwin went before him. And then, you know, other guys, I was hoping to take like a Matt Ryan, but he was gone. You know, a lot of the top tight ends had gone. So, again, it's just a lot of these guys who I had my sights set on because, like Steve said, I was waiting so long to pick again. They all go. And, again, I just, why not go with the best I can?
And hey, I'll say this: when you guys shared your rosters with me, I was happy to see because I knew this format was a tight end premium, and I've seen a lot of people on Twitter posting, you know, their first several picks, and you see, yeah, tight ends flying off the board, hot and heavy. But we know from this podcast and studies that we've looked at that, my goodness, if you don't have like one of the top 2, maybe 3 guys, absolute crapshoot, and there's so many misses. Right. And I see people, you know, like, okay, well, you'd really rather take a shot on a tight end in the 3rd round because it's a tight end premium when, you know, there's a very good chance that pick could bust, or pick up a Mike Evans as your wide receiver 3. So, like, you know, when I saw you had wide receiver, you know, it's like, I probably didn't want to start that way, but, you know, given the alternative, you have to take the best player available.
Yeah, so clearly,
this early on, yeah.
When I make the turn into the 4th round, I can't go wide receiver again. I've got to take somebody a different position at this point. But I'm looking at my options are at running back, you know, okay, so I end up going with Todd Gurley at running back. The running backs that go after him in the draft are Lev Bell, Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers. So that's the group that really you're looking at when I'm making this pick. And Todd Gurley was the RB12 overall in this format last year on kind of a down year for Todd Gurley. And when I'm looking around, I want guys that have a clear defined role at that position that I know are going to get carries. And yes, obviously he has a little bit of a durability concern, but he's going home to Atlanta. I know he's going to get the volume. I know there's no competition for touches. So I just hope he stays healthy. And other than that, I'm going to ride him hopefully to another top 12 finish at the position.
Yeah, I mean, we all 3 of us on this pod, I think, are as high as anybody out there on Todd Gurley heading into 2020. But I think we would all also agree that none of us would prefer him to be the RB1 on our roster. If he's going to be the RB1 on your roster, you better have a legendary wide receiving core like you do. So you know, any drop off from his, you know, RB1. The needed production from that spot on your roster I think would be made up by that insane wide receiver core. You know, that said, Todd Gurley, we all agree that he's in a better situation than he was last year. Now that he's in Atlanta, he's got no competition for the goal line work. He's going to get all the passing volume, which is a part of the reason why he had quoted down year last year. So I think honestly, where he finished last year is his floor as long as he can stay healthy. So you know, you need RB1 production out of him. You're probably going to get it.
Hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. In the 4th round at this point, he easily could finish. You guys know I'm high on Gurley. If he's on the field and healthy, he will finish as a top 12 back, maybe even creep into that like top 8-6 range. I love Todd Gurley in 2020.
All right, so
nice. Real quick, I finished my homework assignment early, Steve. Jameis Winston last year in this format finished as QB 17 overall and QB 22 in points per game. So in a 2 QB league, he was an every week starter, but definitely a far cry from where he finished in most typical leagues because of the emphasis on both accuracy and interceptions.
Yeah, no. Oh, next homework assignment. How many games he didn't score positive points? But anyways, but that's interesting. Yeah, I figured it was well outside the top 12, though.
All right, so getting back to the draft, I've got another very long stretch, and this pick I was actually very excited about. You know, again, quarterbacks, running backs falling off the board. At this point, wide receivers are starting to go. And I'm looking, I know I need a quarterback. Tannehill's out there, and he's a guy that I know Ben and I kind of like, Steve, just because of the accuracy and kind of what we saw from him last year. But there's a player out there that's still sitting there that I just can't pass up. So I go David Johnson in the 5th round. And DJ was in weeks 1 through 6 in 2019. He was RB6 overall in this format and in fantasy points per game. And being the number 1 guy in Houston all year and only needing an RB2 level now since he's my RB2 production, I didn't think I could pass this up.
Everybody talks about how bad he looked coming off injury last year. That's true about so many people out there. And a lot of guys in hindsight will often say they felt like they rushed themselves back and they weren't fully ready to go and all that. I think people are very unfairly totally writing off David Johnson.
And
I think he had a sneaky kind of consistent, not exciting 2018. And in 2019, at the start of it, it looked like DJ was back. And then, obviously the injury happened, Kenyon Drake, the rest is history. But, for better or worse, Bill O'Brien paid what he paid to get David Johnson in a trade. I'm in a good mood. I'm not going to be insulting tonight. So I expect that Bill O'Brien is going to try to prove himself right and try to use David Johnson a lot. And, so I think you made a nice choice here, again, as an RB2. But between David Johnson and Todd Gurley, you should get an RB1 week every week out of those two.
Hope so.
Yeah, I'm David Johnson. I'm one of those people. I'm kind of in between on him. I'm not completely writing him off like a lot of people are. I'm not very high on him either. I do think one of the things that's not talked about enough that is a good thing for David Johnson heading into 2020 is I think he'll benefit a lot from having Deshaun Watson as his quarterback. That should help open up some lanes for him, I think. I know the line's not great down there in Houston, but he's going to get the volume. And, I'd say I'm a little more critical of the pick just because you could have had the guy you pick next a little earlier instead of David Johnson. I do like this next guy you're going to talk about quite a bit more. So go ahead, Joe.
Really? All right. Well, I like it.
He's grown on me.
Okay. All right. So I turn around and, well, lo and behold, at this point I was debating taking Tannehill as my quarterback. Well, Tannehill gets taken right after I pick David Johnson. So now...
And now, listen, everyone, I don't have a ton of experience in Superflex, but I was in no way prepared for Ryan Tannehill to be going in 6 rounds of drafts. Sorry to interrupt you, Jay, but we're talking about the 603. Jay is talking about the 603 right now, and he couldn't get his hands on Ryan Tannehill.
No.
That's insanity.
No. And, A.J. Brown, a guy I love, is already gone. So, that's just telling you, the drafting is just crazy. So, Tannehill's gone. Joe Burrow is gone. At this point, it's getting thin at QB. So again, I don't want to reach on a guy that I really don't even want to start week to week at this point. So again, sitting out there, a running back who I know is going to get carries, has a clear defined role on a team and on an offense, I go with David Montgomery, running back Chicago Bears. Tell me how great it is, Steve.
It is a fine pick because at this point in time, they're probably, I imagine in both your guys' drafts, by this point in time, when it came to running back, there probably wasn't bell cow type guys left or guys with a defined role who will get volume. And I look at it like David Montgomery, finishes like a low end RB2 last season, but he only started 8 games. And that offense, everything was as poor and terrible as it possibly could have been. So I just think The arrow can only point up. How up? I don't know, but he's gonna get, I would think, north of 265 touches. He may, if they're good enough, maybe scrape 300. And getting that kind of volume out of your third running back is, it's awesome. I just hope he stays low in like regular redraft leagues where you can get him. He's a heck of a value right now.
Steve, Ben, before you go, Steve, to your point, in that limited action, he was still RB24 overall in this format, which is, speaks for itself. But two, I wanted to both, Ben, before you go, let you know the next few running backs who come off the board after David Montgomery's selected, and that's Raheem Mostert, Mark Ingram, and Kareem Hunt. So that's the group of players at the running back position that were available.
Yeah, I think the only argument of a potential better combo than what you have in David Johnson and David Montgomery at the 5'10" and 6'3" spot is maybe David Montgomery and Kareem Hunt. But it's debatable, and I happen to be on your side of the coin when it comes to David Johnson, and I like the pick. At this point, you need David Montgomery to give you RB3 or flex type of production on your roster. And there's going to be some weeks where he gives you RB1 production. And I think, he reminds me in his heyday, right at this current moment, fantasy production expectation wise, of Frank Gore. Just rock solid Jonathan Stewart type, rock solid RB15 to RB20 production. Lock it up.
Love it. All right, so at this point, I'm in the 7th round. I still don't have a quarterback or a tight end in a super flex tight end premium league. But it's fine. What could possibly go wrong? But I'm looking, in this long stretch that I'm waiting for picks, Ben Roethlisberger comes off the board. Jared Goff comes off the board. It is getting thin at quarterback, so I got to take somebody. And I'm really hoping you guys like this guy. I end up going Baker Mayfield at the 7-10.
Woo!
Now, I'm not expecting Baker and that offense to meet the level of expectation that we all had entering last season, but I am expecting it to be better than what it was last season. So maybe somewhere in between, and then maybe that can lead to him being better than QB 27, which is what he was in this format last year.
Well, he was QB 27 in this format last year. However, as a rookie from week 7 on in 2018, he was QB 8 overall in that span in this format. So which guy do you think we're getting under Kevin Stefanski? I say neither. I think you're getting a bake show you've never seen before.
I certainly hope so.
Both, Steve. You and me both.
I think that certainly I love Stefanski being the head coach, and especially if they implement a lot of the things and schemes that they used in Minnesota. I think the offense is built beautifully to execute that type of offensive scheme. And, the big thing with Baker will be cutting down those turnovers. And I think that in this system, we're going to see just that. So while he probably won't have volume to, put up some crazy 4,500 yards, 35 touchdowns, he very well might be a guy who throws 25 to 28 touchdowns, but, hopefully can keep those interceptions in the single digits. And if that's the case, he's going to be a perfectly fine, quarterback for you to start, in this league, in this format. So, I, like you were saying, Jay, the cupboard was, I'm sure, pretty bare. And that's what stinks about, having those, like, you didn't have back-to-back picks, but when you're picking in the lower part, of that first round, you miss on runs when they happen.
Exactly.
And you just have to sit back and,
just let
watch
it come to you. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I will not forget where I was when I made the selection of Baker. I'm in Cane's drive-thru, getting some lunch, and all I'm thinking to myself is, God, do I have to do this? And this voice is telling me, this guy was QB5 in ADP not too long ago. So there was a lot of anticipation for him entering last season, a lot of expectation, and a lot of hype, and now all of a sudden I'm getting him as like QB 22. So I felt like there was value there.
There was value there, Jay, and he was somebody that I was targeting that I expected to get at a very nice value as well. If I remember correctly, he didn't even make it to my 5th round.
Wow.
I would have loved to have Baker. And to Steve's point, so if we expect Baker to not, set the world on fire, but to have upwards of 28 to 30 touchdowns and say 7 to 10 interceptions, and then say an accuracy rate of near 70%, all of a sudden in this format, you are talking about a rock solid QB1. And that's exactly what he was in the latter half of 2018 when he was setting the world on fire. And I think he's a better Baker Mayfield now than he was then. And I think he's got better weapons and a better situation.
I really hope, like Steve said, he can cut down on the turnovers. And the icing on the cake for Baker Mayfield is his ability to scramble and use his legs to create. And in this format, that's a nice little bonus for you. So I was happy with that pick. I needed a quarterback. I also need a tight end. So I turned right around. All the premier tight ends went early. And there was a run on tight ends, and I still was able to get the guy who I really wanted, and that was Hayden Hurst, new Atlanta Falcons tight end. All I kept dreaming about was Austin Hooper stats over and over again in my mind. And you see the Hayden Hurst stats from last year, and you're like, okay, they're okay. But then you look at the Hooper stats, and you're like, yes, that's what I want. Can he just get a piece of that? So, yeah, I went Hayden Hurst, and I was very thrilled with it. I'm glad he fell to me.
I, spoiler alert, took Hayden Hurst on my team as well. I love this pick out of Jay, and I'm not going to say anything else because I'll be honest, I'm going to take you on a little Hayden Hurst journey when it comes time to talk about him in mine. So I'll defer to you and Steve-O.
Yeah, I was going to say, you came prepared proper when it comes time to talk about Hayden Hurst in this one. And you guys both know, I mean, I was in on Hurst like almost immediately when that, trade went down. It was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And, it's just grown on me more and more and more because, it's hard to find tight ends who you can even bank on to get a fair amount of targets.
Right.
Whether it's a per game or season.
Right.
Yeah, precisely. And that we keep talking about it in one way or the other, whether we're talking about Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, we just keep talking about the volume. I mean, this is a team that threw the ball more than any team in the NFL last year. The targets, there's going to be plenty of them. I'm not worried about Gurley, Ridley, and Jones. Hurst is going to get targets, and he is certainly talented enough. Atlanta thinks so. Baltimore thought so. So, if he's healthy this season, I think he's definitely – I mean, all those people that took tight ends before you, Jay, I have a feeling, Hayden Hurst would be finishing right up there with a lot of those or above a lot of those guys.
As I'm waiting on tight end too, everything that we covered in our previous podcasts about the ADP versus actual of tight ends and how – basically half of the tight ends that finish as a tight end 1 in the season go undrafted or outside the top 12. And that's just in the back of my mind. And as, these guys are falling, I'm like, this is how it happens. I'm taking a great tight end after all these other guys go. He's absolutely going to give me a positive return on investment. So,
love it.
With that being said, I found this one might have been my favorite pick because I'm sitting here thinking, how is this guy falling? The disrespect. Yes, Ben. The disrespect is real. Jarvis Landry falls to me in the 9th round. A guy who finished as WR22 overall in this format last year. A WR2, and he's my WR4. So I'm thrilled. I get Lando on my team. Bless him. Let's go.
I mean, he's dealing with an off-season hip surgery. The last I heard Kevin Stefanski talk about him, he said he looked great. Lando takes a lot of pride in having never missed a game due to injury. I don't expect it to start now, which could equate to maybe a slow first couple weeks for him while he's getting back, but that's maybe. Lando is a beast. He's as tough as it comes. He's as underrated as it comes. And he is an absolute stud and an absolute steal to be a wide receiver 4 on your team, especially when you consider the 3 wide receivers that you have ahead of him. Your wide receiving core is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And the thing I don't think I hear enough people talk about when do talk about the Browns receiving core, obviously Odell gets a lot of love, but man, Jarvis Landry, you saw like the huge step as far as like him and Baker Mayfield and their connection from year one. Everyone was very disappointed in Lando's first season in Cleveland. Felt like he had a big drop off, but then you saw him bounce back, last season. And I believe he either finished solely in third place or tied for third in red zone targets last season, which are huge for wide receivers. And that also shows that Baker Mayfield has trust in him down in that part of the field. And yeah, in the ninth round, I mean, that's just it's a great pick. It really is.
I don't understand the disrespect for Jarvis Landry. Like you said, Steve, everybody loves Odell and he gets praise, and Landry just gets crapped on. After he signed his big contract, people were just hating on it all over the place, and I just don't understand it. I don't know if it's because he lined up in the slot a lot and they don't think a guy who lines up in that position should get paid a lot, but he's played all over the field. Go back to his Miami days. The guy made unbelievable catches on the outside, and did he get a lot of short balls and rack up a lot of catches bailing out a quarterback? Sure, but that's not his fault. He's doing what his team needs to win, and he always does. So I don't understand the dislike for Landry.
He's a high character guy. He's as tough as it comes. He's as talented as anybody.
People like him? I don't get it. Anyway,
I mean, real football people love him. People that just want to pay attention to just fantasy only maybe don't like him, but that's foolish too. I was gonna say that's foolish too. I mean, Jay, a lot of people are moving back to half PPR because they didn't like guys like Jarvis Landry dominating their PPR.
Yeah. That's what it is. You're right. All right. So, Steve, this one's for you. This pick was all for you, my friend. I needed another tight end. I wanted to solidify that position. It was between, guys like Dallas Goedert in my mind, but I ended up going with Jared Cook. I have never been a big Jared Cook guy, but every time you have him and the guy's scoring touchdowns left and right, it just pains me because I'm like, why wasn't I bigger on him or higher on him? So, yeah. With Hayden Hurst, I felt like I had a safe volume of targets. With Jared Cook, I feel like I have more upside in the scoring.
I mean, yeah, one thing you didn't touch on was how he has fared in this specific format over the last couple of years. Last year, tight end 7 overall, tight end 10 in points per game. In 2018, tight end 5 overall. I mean, the guy is an absolute stud, and I mean, at the end of the day, he is a giant target for Drew Brees in the red zone, one of the most accurate quarterbacks in football. And in a format like this, where touchdowns matter as much as anything, Jared Cook is a very outstanding bet here at the top of the 10th. In a tight end premium league, tight ends are going higher than they would, I guess, quote, normally would in a single QB league, in a standard, PPR fantasy football league. But I just think in this type of format, the value you are getting on Jared Cook at the top of the 10th round is immense. And that's on top of adding it to Hayden Hurst. This is a guy you could flex on more weeks than not, probably.
Yep.
Yeah, like Ben said, in this format, it's a little surprising that he made it this far in your draft.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the old man syndrome and people are like he's got to start falling off at some point, but
I think so. I think some of it too was there's a lot of people who were really high on him heading into last season, and because of the early season injury and not quite being on the same page with Drew Brees immediately, and of course Brees had his own injury, so the first half of Jared Cook's season last year, it was disappointing, and that might have burned some people, but over the second half of last season, I mean, if you were to stat him out first, like his second half for an entire season, I mean, he's over 1,000 yards and 14 touchdowns. I'm not calling for that this year, but you definitely saw a switch flip in the second half of the season with he and Drew Brees. So in the 10th round in a tight end premium league, I mean, I would have loved making that pick too, especially as your second tight end. If he gets hurt, okay, whatever. You still have Hayden Hurst.
Yeah, so at this point, I feel like running back solid, wide receiver solid. I've got a quarterback. My tight ends are well positioned. So now I'm going to start going after some younger, higher upside talent. You know, I debated with going with younger guys with higher upside, even though they're unknowns, versus going with like guys like Kerryon Johnson, Marlon Mack, who all of a sudden people are writing off entirely, even though they're not dead, still playing football, still can be fantasy relevant. But I ended up going with a couple of guys just because, first up, in the 11th round, I went with wide receiver Justin Jefferson. And that's because he's taken that Stephon Diggs role in the Minnesota offense. And I wish the Philadelphia Eagles would have taken him. And two, I think he's going to fill a nice role in that offense, and he's going to be involved early, and he could be one of the more bankable rookie wide receivers. And again, I'm set at receivers, so if he ends up panning out, then it's an absolute bonus for me, and I think there's a high upside to this pick. So in Dane Brugler's draft guide, he called him a seasoned route runner with the physical ball skills and competitive makeup that translates to the NFL, projecting as a quarterback-friendly target ideally suited for the slot. So, you know, I've said it in other podcasts of ours. When Michael Thomas came out, his one accolade that everybody went to was how good of a route runner he was and how that translates to early NFL success. So when I hear that, and I hear that that's what the scouts see, that perks up my ears. And again, wish the Eagles would have gotten him, but I see a path to some early scoring for Justin Jefferson.
I know you so well. The exact precise reason that I picked this quote from Dane Brugler is because I know how you feel about the route running. Man. And I mean, this guy sounds like he was made for Kirk Cousins.
Yes,
like Kirk
exactly.
is a highly accurate quarterback that does not prefer to push the ball downfield.
Right,
so a guy that's just going to come up and eat up the slot, eat up the middle of the field.
Right.
Sign Kirk Cousins up for that all day. That's a very nice pick at the top of the 11th.
And again, a little bit of a reach probably, but he's just a guy that I wanted.
Sorry. Well, and so the people that kind of put down Justin Jefferson will be quick to point out, well, the Minnesota Vikings, they're going to run the ball. There won't be a lot of passing volume. Well, Minnesota's defense, I think, is going to be a lot more down this year than they have been in quite a while. I don't think people will give enough credit to Kevin Stefanski and what he did for that offense. It's going to be a different looking offense. I just think, there probably will be an uptick in the passing volume. And, there's such an equation to getting around 100 targets and how that typically translates out to, a guy who you can start as a wide receiver, in a 3 wide receiver format. So I think, like you said, Jay, you don't have to start him.
Right.
And so even as a rookie, if he's like rookie wide receivers tend to do, he's, comes on a little slower at first, he could certainly turn into somebody that you do want to start every week. And I don't see why he's not going to end up on this season flirting with around 100 targets, because who else are they targeting in Minnesota? And like I said, I do think they will throw the ball considerably more than they did last year, just out of force that they have to.
Well, and barring injury, the last couple of years, Minnesota, even with an offense that has been a bit of a roller coaster, they have supported 2 top 15 wide receivers in Thielen and Diggs. So, it is very easy. Yes, did they bring in some other receivers? Yes. Are they great receivers by any means? No. So, I think the path is there for him, like you said, to really carve out a nice role in that offense very early. Steve, Ben, you look very concerned.
Gentlemen, I am on the clock.
Oh boy, we got a live pick on the podcast.
Well, you got us here for advice, brother.
Yeah, very interesting. Don't mind me. Continue on.
All right, so
okay.
So really, the last interesting pick is a guy who another rookie that I'm very high on. And so in the 12th round, I go with rookie running back Antonio Gibson. And again, probably earlier than most guys would have taken him, but he's just somebody that I want. He's in the Redskins' backfield. In that backfield, can't stay healthy. This guy can. Dane Brugler said in his 2020 draft guide that Gibson is, quote, a broken tackle machine with the versatile athleticism to create any time he touches the ball. And I know Ben and I were watching some highlight reels of him the other night, and the dude can just play anywhere. In college at Memphis, he played in the backfield. He played at wide receiver. He returned kicks. He played in the slot. He played on the outside. He pretty much scored from everywhere on the field. And unlike, look, I love J.K. Dobbins as a running back, but when you play for Ohio State, you're running through holes that traditionally are, any three of us could run through against a lot of the competition. But when you're playing for, smaller schools and you're going up against very light competition, you're having to play through contact and you're having to create on your own. And you go back and watch some of those highlights, and a lot of the commentators are saying, what a great individual effort that was, because he gets the ball and he creates in space and he's not afraid of contact. And another stat that I love is the guy has never fumbled the football. So I love hearing that. We'll see if that's true with the change in football. That can always create issues with guys, but just a dynamic player in a backfield where they've got old man AP, they've got always injured Darius Geis, and I love this guy. He's got a big, powerful frame, and I don't know if they're going to play him at wide receiver. I don't know if they're going to play him in the backfield. I don't know if I really care, because they got to get him on the field.
Within his range of outcomes is becoming the number one running back option on that team this year. Right. So to get that at this point or later, like maybe somebody else on this podcast did in this draft, is an outstanding value.
Yeah, I definitely like the pick. I mean, you're at a point, Jay, where you're kind of going to start throwing some darts, try to get a little bit of upside, and at least you're targeting a backfield that is wide open. And I can't see Geis doing much of anything this year. And, AP, it's like, when's that just going to completely fall off? And, yeah, I mean, the pass catching's there. And they used a third-round pick on the guy. It was 66th overall. Right. So it's like you don't use that kind of draft equity and not utilize him. Well, they don't have weapons. No. They need weapons. So they're going to try to use this guy.
That's exactly it. I honestly, watching him play and seeing where they took him in the draft, Steve, it's almost like this is who they wish Darius Geis would have been for them, but it just never worked out. So now they have their dynamic playmaker who can hopefully stay healthy and stay on the field. So, and then, real quick, I'll just go with my last two picks real quick. I needed more quarterbacks because they kept falling off. So at this point, the last two guys that I feel like are at least decent probable starters are Nick Foles and Ryan Fitzpatrick. I just needed to get some warm bodies. And honestly, later in the draft, hopefully none of my league mates are listening to this podcast, I'm probably going to go with Brown's backup quarterback just in case Baker gets dinged up or something like that, and give myself a little insurance policy. And they've got a heck of a wide receiving core and offense, so somebody who can step right in is, who is it?
Case Keenum.
Case Keenum. God, yes, thank you. So I'll probably
I should have made you do the Torg rule.
I know. Make it up.
Hey, right. And like we talked about just a little bit before we got on tonight, Jay, I really like, this late, in this format. Sure, he might not start all season, but Ryan Fitzpatrick, not a bad pick at all. And you guys know I've been digging through like a lot of, numbers lately for, in relation to the preview podcast that'll be coming up. And, Fitzpatrick, and he did only start 13 games, but he's tied for 9th in the NFL in red zone touchdown passes. It's just a random stat, but that's in the top 10. And he, was out 3 starts. So he played pretty well down in that area of the field. He had a good season last year, and I don't see him. I think he's going to be somebody you can start, immediately in a super flex league. So it's just a little surprising. I don't know if people avoided him because they don't think he's going to start all 16 games, but I don't see Tua in a COVID-19 offseason with no preseason getting rolled out anytime soon either.
Well, thank you for the compliment, but I'm a little offended that you didn't compliment my pick of Nick Foles, former Super Bowl MVP. Big Nick Foles, if I will.
I mean, right now, there's a lot of people that still think Mitch is going to be the starter. I understand that the behavior says that they did not pick up his option. They paid Nick Foles to come to town. So you don't know if that's a, hey, we're going to give this guy one more shot and we've got a legit viable option if he, again, for 3 games shows us what he showed us last year. Or is it a true competition? Or is Nick Foles just outright to be the guy? At this point in the draft, Jay, it's not a bad gamble. But if nobody is picking up Mitch Trubisky in a few rounds, you might want to look at him as well, just in case.
There is no way I'm taking Mitch Trubisky on my team. I want no part of it. Listen,
Mitch has been a viable fantasy option before, and if he beats out Nick Foles, my argument is that he has got his act together. He is a very young quarterback in general. I think he started very few games in college before he came out, and this is his 3rd year. It's his 3rd or 4th. I don't know. It's his 3rd or 4th year. The kid's still learning. He's had a couple of coaching changes. All I'm saying is in the 21st round, if he's still there, you might want to think about grabbing him just in case Nick Foles isn't the starter.
Okay, fair enough.
Start of 2020.
At that point, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel anyways, which is what Mitch Trubisky is.
Yeah, I'm not telling you to go in the 3rd round or anything. I'm talking about the 20th.
One of the big things that did hurt Trubisky, in all fairness, last year was he was pretty banged up for a good portion of the season, and that pretty much took away his threat to run. And I think that's what really helped him a lot when he had some breakout games in 2018 was, he had a rushing floor and he was a threat to run. And that really helped him as far as what he could get away with doing to opposing defenses. And I think once he was unfortunately stuck back there relying on being a pocket passer, it was gross.
Well, here's the only thing that makes me nervous about Trubisky is that coaching staff is probably on the hot seat, and leash is probably pretty short. And the admission that they made a massive mistake with moving up to pick him in the draft, passing over future Hall of Famer Pat Mahomes, is really going to come back to bite him, and it's going to cost people jobs. And when your job is on the line and you need to win football games, they may look to a guy like Nick Foles, who does have a Super Bowl under his belt, to lead that team and hopefully get him some wins. At some point, it's going to become which guy puts you in a better position to win football games, so that leash is going to be pretty short no matter who's in that backfield.
The reality is, in a league like this, you cannot have any less than 2 starting quarterbacks on your roster. So for you to take your shot at a guy that is very likely to start early in Fitzpatrick and a guy who is probably pretty likely to start late in Foles, you have combined 2 full starters on your roster with them and Big.
Right.
And then and what I was going to say earlier when you were talking about Keenum, it's interesting in leagues like this, you almost have to handcuff your quarterbacks instead of handcuffing your running backs because they're so immensely valuable in this league. Yep. Overall, you go into a draft thinking you have one strategy and then the trends slap you in the face and just make you completely adapt on the fly. I think you did that as well as you possibly could in this situation. And, I think you have a real nice start to this, man. I mean, you're 2/3 of the way through. You've got some nice reliable options, some nice upside options, and some nice options that have some room to grow throughout the season as well. So I think you got a nice variety.
I feel pretty good about my team. I feel like I have a legitimate shot to make the playoffs, and I'm excited. So let's turn it over to Ben's team. You're going to hear a lot of similarities. Before we got on this podcast, I said, this is going to be a quick little episode. We'll just go through our squads. Here we are 40 minutes in, and we're halfway through. All right, get ready. I'm going to
And what did I say as soon as you said that? Not now. I mean, I thought the same thing. I wasn't going to say it, and now here we are. Congratulations.
Here we are. It's all my fault.
Here we are.
All right, we're going to unveil your roster to the audience in 3, 2, 1. Boop.
So I had it a little better than Jay. I was drafting out of the 107 spot instead of the 110. The 110 is a tough, the 110. The 110 is a tough spot to draft out of. So Jay did a fantastic job doing that. And I got really lucky, I think, in my first round. My first round, predictably, at the top went CMC. At the 102, you had Pat Mahomes, then Saquon. At the 104, you had Lamar Jackson. At the 105, Michael Thomas. He ain't making it to the 110 in my draft. and at the 106, Alvin Kamara right in front of me. leaving me no choice at the 107 but to take Zeke Elliott. Right after Zeke, the person behind me took George Kittle instead of Travis Kelce.
Wow.
Don't know about that.
Wow.
And so I could have went early tight end. I was as determined as possible entering this draft to try to treat this like a single quarterback, non-tight end premium league, because like Steve alluded to earlier, our studies and our research has taught us that on average, about half of tight end ones every single year go completely undrafted in your standard like 12-team PPR redraft format. So, I wanted to wait as long as I could. And again, I just couldn't pass up the value on Zeke. RB4 overall in this format and in points per game in 2019. Over the last 2 years, averages 1,900 total yards, almost 12 touchdowns. Kellen Moore staying on as offensive coordinator, the continuity that comes with that is, I think, a very undervalued aspect of the Cowboys this offseason. I think it's a savvy decision by Mike McCarthy.
What do you want me to say? You got Ezekiel Elliott. If I'm in your spot, that's exactly who I'm drafting. Easy choice.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You could make the argument that he could be the RB2 behind CMC in drafts. So getting him at the 107. And you guys know, I've been looking at a lot of different like red zone goal line numbers, running backs, wide receivers. Dallas, they do not throw the ball in goal line situations to their wide receivers. It's all about Zeke Elliott. He one of the most efficient runners down in that area of the field. It reminds me of Emmitt Smith back in the day, like the Emmett zone they used to call it when they get down there. And it's like, that's what it is for Zeke. He will get fed. He will get those touches. And those are like the most important touches to get. So I just think he's really safe and really solid, and you have to take him there.
Totally agree. Couldn't believe he was there. Couldn't pass him up. I was back up at the 206. Between the 107 and the 206, just listen to what transpired. Kittle, Kelce, Dak Prescott, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Julio, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, Kenyon Drake, leaving me no other choice at the 206 spot than to go with Devontae, I'm going to get 1,000 targets, Adams. He was wide receiver 6 in points per game in this format in 2019. And part of that time he was getting his legs back coming off an injury. I truly believe he is a 10 to 15 target per game guy in 2020. No, all kidding aside.
No, look, I love the pick. Obviously, I picked him as well. The only ridiculous thing is that you got him at the 206. Like, what?
That's because all these quarterbacks and tight ends are going all over the place.
Like I said, sometimes you just got to let the draft come to you. And when Devontae Adams falls in your lap, you get a WR1. You have an RB1. Those are, and arguably, like Steve said, DA could be arguably the WR1 overall. Ezekiel Elliott, you could pencil him in for RB2 overall, and you were able to wait on both of them and get nice values on them, which is ridiculous to say.
And Ben, it's interesting. I like the fact, because I didn't know this, that you were trying to treat the draft more like a standard one quarterback, one tight end, forget about the premiums and stuff because of some of the studies that we've looked at. And I think it's also worth mentioning while we're talking about it, there's a heck of a lot of volatility and disappointment with quarterbacks year to year. As we've talked about it, the top quarterback overall from the previous season tends to dive bomb the next year. I think when we did that, close to half of the quarterbacks are guys that are going outside the top 12 that finish in the top 12. And it's a position that's all over the place. So, it makes you I understand that you can start 2 quarterbacks in this league, but when you're passing up, top tier, top 5 kind of guys at running back, wide receiver, it's like you better be really confident that quarterback that you just took at the 102 in this whole thing is going to have more than 26 touchdowns, Patrick Mahomes, like he did last season. Just saying.
He's going to have 50 this year, so don't worry about it, Steve.
Well, then totally worth the
Totally worth it. Totally worth it.
He might. Coming back around to me at the 307, just tons more tons more quarterbacks taken between then and now, a few more tight ends as well. And, I was lucky to not have to make the decision between the guy who went before me and the guy who I took, because Aaron Jones was taken at the 306, leaving me no better options at the 307 than a guy we already talked about tonight, Todd Gurley. Like I said, he finished as RB15 in points per game in this format last season. I feel like it is safe to call that his floor in 2020 because there is no vulturing of his goal line work whatsoever in a very high octane offense. And because his targets were stupid low for Todd Gurley last season, and that should change in Atlanta as well.
Yeah, I do feel like there's a little bit of an overreaction. There was concern about Todd Gurley coming into the season last year, and I think really, despite of all that, he had a really solid fantasy season, but still, kind of like Jared Cook, Steve, just the view is just this downward trending arrow for Todd Gurley, so people are just backing off and staying away, and really, I think the three of us are kind of high on him because of the value especially. I mean, is he going to be a top-end running back? No. Is he a rock-solid, potentially RB1 in that RB8 to 12 range? Yeah, I like that. The volume's going to be there and a great offense. So, I mean, great pick, Ben. You didn't get him at the 403 like I did, but 307's still very good. Nice value.
We will have plenty of time to compare our rosters if you would like to go down that road.
It's funny, when we were going through it, there are a lot of similarities side by side, so it's interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. And, the three of us have been in close contact throughout this entire process. Yep. We're all in support of each other. And, we're like-minded on probably like 60 to 70% of guys. Yep. So, there's bound to be some overlap. I will say, back to my strategy and my outlook heading into this, I made myself a promise that I would not draft a quarterback before the 5th round. And even in that scenario, I thought I'm going to be, quote, reaching on a guy like Matt Ryan or somebody that I love that's a middle of the road quarterback. No, I bring that up at my 406 again when I drafted another running back, because based on what I saw from the 307 to the 406, I strongly considered going quarterback because I felt the pressure at the 406. Yeah. It was only because at the 405, Matthew Stafford was taken. Along the same run, Carson Wentz went. Matt Ryan went as well. And so, just three quarterbacks.
All the guys you were targeting, basically, a Stafford, a Ryan, those would have been great.
So I'm left to either I feel like in this draft, the wide receiver is the deepest position, even though we're starting 3 of them. I felt like the high-end running backs were a lot fewer and far between remaining than the wide receivers. So I felt like I had to go with Melvin Gordon. He was RB17 in points per game in this format in 2019, and that was splitting time with Austin Eckler. So people might have the same concern about Phillip Lindsay. I did pretty well with Austin Eckler doing pretty well also. And from week 9 on, he was in this format RB7 overall and RB6 in points per game. So when you're talking about Zeke, Gurley, and Melvin Gordon, I'm loving that running back core.
Yeah, so heavy on the running back to start this draft, but I got to say, I really hated this pick. Only because I was insanely jealous of it. I wanted to snatch Melvin Gordon in my draft so bad, but it just did not work out. His ADP has quietly, it was an amazing value a few weeks ago, going in the 5th round in some drafts or the late 4th, and now all of a sudden it's continuing to creep up because that value people are keying on, so he's getting more expensive. So I'm liking that less and less because I think he's a great pick. In that Denver we have seen that Denver offense, the run game and what it can do, and now you're adding Melvin Gordon.
And now you're adding Pat Shurmur as your OC.
Listen, I love Royce Freeman. He was a big disappointment. I still think he's a good running back, but he's going to have to find an opportunity elsewhere. Melvin, like we always say, you got to follow the money. Melvin Gordon's going to be the man in that backfield, and I can't wait to see what he can do. The good thing is this could be a shortened season, so he'll at least stay healthy during the entire thing.
Shut your filthy mouth. Ruining this episode with that.
So, yeah. I don't know, guys. Melvin Gordon, I'm probably lower on than a lot of people, I guess. He when I found out he signed with Denver, I just for me that almost just made him dead to me. I'm not a
Wow. All
big
right. I
I'm
like
just
it.
not a big believer in that offense. Period. And I know he got the money, but it's Philip Lindsay's he's still there. He's still a very good football player. I don't know what they're gonna do with Royce Freeman, but for me overall, it's just like that team's offensive philosophy and that it's just not good.
Well,
So
their
we'll see.
offensive
And
philosophy
he
has
doesn't stay healthy.
undoubtedly changed. Their offensive philosophy has undoubtedly changed with a new OC coming to town.
But
We still don't know for sure how much. Like, I don't know if Vic Fangio's like, here, Shermer, do anything you like. It's totally yours. You're in the driver's seat. Or if he still is going to have like his defensive minded influence as the head coach. Like, I'm just saying it's a question mark.
Steve,
And he's never healthy. I don't know. I've had some bad Melvin Gordon experiences in my
Steve,
past, and it probably just
I'm
He's
it's
never
also
healthy at the end of the year, but for the first 14 weeks, he's usually pretty outstanding.
you know.
But again, on it's like I don't know. I'm just low on him. That's all.
Well,
And
see,
that's okay.
and I'm glad you bring that up because like
Terrible pick.
a guy like Jerry Jeudy, I really like, but I just don't like him in that offense. To your point, Steve, like it's the passing game of that offense that I just worry about consistent volume. If anything, I worry about the ball getting pushed downfield in that offense, but the run game, it just seems like it's something they always have to rely on because let's face it, they haven't had a quarterback in forever who can pass the ball accurately, consistently, and push it downfield.
Well, and that's the thing. If Drew Lock doesn't take a big step, it's going to make all those running backs' lives miserable, whether they're getting the volume or not. And Lock, I mean, I know what he won all of his starts. Whoop-de-doo from a fantasy standpoint. I'm just saying I think he threw for over 200 yards one single time in those 5 starts. Like I won't touch Cortland Sutton this year because of that. Nonetheless, Jerry Jeudy. So
right.
I'm just down on the whole offense from a fantasy standpoint.
And I'm just saying that there's plenty of people in this format that went way high tight end and quarterback whose RB1 is not better than my RB3 in Melvin Gordon. And I also have maybe the best wide receiver in the game as well. So I felt like it was a good spot for me to pull the trigger on an RB3 there. I definitely felt like he was best available for me. We have varying philosophies and opinions about Melvin Gordon, and that's okay. We'll hopefully, Jay, get to figure it out and find out very soon. Moving on to our my fifth round at the 507. I was shocked that that was the earliest that I was going to allow myself to go quarterback. That was not where I planned to go quarterback, but I was forced to go quarterback at this point. At the 507, I went Ryan Tannehill, and I'll be very honest. I'm a Ryan Tannehill guy, but in this format, I had much preferred him to be my QB2 as opposed to my QB1. Even though I was determined to wait on quarterback, I got to say, I'm surprised how crazy my division was in drafting quarterbacks. The 507 is 55 overall, people. Ryan Tannehill was the 16th quarterback taken off the board at 55 overall. Just let that sink in for 1 second. I'll be honest, I wasn't prepared for that. I was not expecting that. And I was just like too stubborn. And at the 4th round, I don't know. I was shocked. That said, from the moment that Tannehill stepped on the field in week 7 in this format, he was QB3 overall and QB4 in points per game. Plain and simple, he elevated that entire team. And I'm here to tell you it wasn't a fluke, and I expect more of the same in 2020.
Well, and I know we'll probably differ a little bit from Steve just as a believer because, he had a little bit of a tough go in Miami, but when we did the QB study in the analysis of last season, seeing Tannehill's numbers was very eye-opening. Both his accuracy, the volume, that I think the volume alone, the accuracy and all the stats were amazing, but you assumed, okay, he had high accuracy because he wasn't throwing the ball a lot, or he wasn't throwing the ball downfield. Then you look at his yardage and his pass attempts, and it was really all there. It was a complete picture of a great quarterback performance, which was very surprising out of Ryan Tannehill. Now, I'm sure the point Steve's going to make is, let's see him do it for an entire season, and that is a fair point to make. But at this point in the draft, when you're desperate for a quarterback, listen, I would have been happy to have Ryan Tannehill, and like you said, the goal was to have him as your QB2. He would have been a great complementary piece to a Matt Ryan or a Matt Stafford or somebody like that who you were hoping to get in the 4th, 5th round. It just didn't materialize. It didn't work out that way.
Well, yeah. So I know I've talked a little bit about Ryan Tannehill in previous podcasts, and more or less just joking around, trying to have a little bit of fun with him. Like in all seriousness, though, like you said, Ben, at this point, there's 15 other quarterbacks off the board. He's the quarterback 16. That's not like a crazy reach. I'm not going to be critical about that pick at all. And it's funny doing some of the research I've been doing. The highest completion percentage rate in the entire NFL in the red zone belongs to Ryan Tannehill. And I'll tell you, guys like Tom Brady or finish middle of the road. It's a tough area of the field to have a high completion rate at, and a touchdown to interception ratio. And I wasn't aware until I got on tonight all the kind of intricate detail that goes into the scoring format for quarterbacks. So when it does come to a guy who's going to have a higher completion percentage, who's going to not turn the ball over and throw interceptions, is evidenced by his 22 touchdowns versus 6 interceptions, and from starting only week 7 on. My biggest things about Tannehill is I don't believe in him having a lot of volume to end as a high-end guy, but in this format with the guys you've already stacked on your roster, perfectly good starting quarterback, and probably in this format was overlooked to make it to quarterback 16.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely some guys who went earlier that left me scratching my head, even in this format. I'm like, boy, you're taking a big risk on a guy who hasn't proven it, period, as a quarterback, let alone in this scoring format.
And don't forget, he's got a little bit of a rushing floor. And I just want to remind you guys of a couple of stats. 5 out of 9 times he was QB6 or better last year. 7 of 9 times he was QB12 or better. He was number 1 in yards per attempt, combined with being number 3 in pass accuracy at higher than 70%. Like you said, Steve, in this very specific format with a little bit of rushing upside, that accuracy upside. And I believe, Jay, when we calculated it, I believe the numbers came out to, and I could be wrong, and I apologize if I am, but 29 to 30 pass attempts per game once Tannehill was the starter. That's not some sit on the football type of guy. There's plenty of opportunity there. And if he's number 1 in yards per attempt, 25 to 30 passes is all the man needs if he's going to be a pretty accurate quarterback.
Like I said, when you pair the volume with all of those other stats, it's very eye-opening.
Yes, sir. Moving on to probably my most enjoyable pick of the draft. I'm not going to say so. It's not my favorite pick. It's not my best pick, but my partner in crime over here at Foresight, Jay, channeled his inner Gardner Minshew in a video challenge a la The League, if you are familiar with that gem of a show from the blast from the past. He busts out an old school video challenge, talking crap from his new RV about everything he's going to do in Scott Fish Bowl. It was hilarious. It was great. So I had to go Gardner Minshew. The reality is he was the 21st quarterback off the board. Even more quarterbacks went after the 507 to the 606. So now we're 11 spots. I told you how the 507 is 55 overall. Now we're talking about 66 overall, where Gardner Minshew is the 21st quarterback off the board. Absolutely nuts. The pros for Minshew for me, there is no Nick Foles breathing down his neck. That defense is decimated. They're working on trying to decimate it even more via trade. Minshew's got a year under his belt. And from weeks 1 to 9 in this format, in his rookie season, he was QB 15. Not bad when you consider the strength of my roster everywhere else so far. And I honestly expect that same level or better from him in 2020. Even in the 6 at QB 21, I like the value in this format.
6 quarterbacks went in 11 spots after you took
stupid.
Ryan Tannehill. It's unbelievable. And, like you said, love Gardner Minshew, the person, would you have rather maybe gone somewhere else? Probably, but at this point, your hands are tied. You're backed into a corner. You got to pull the trigger. And, listen, he did take some time off to find himself, recenter himself. He traveled this great country in his brand new RV, had a hell of a time, documented it. Actually,
clearly your inspiration.
He is. He found himself. He's got a good sense of humor. He's got a good head on his shoulders. If anybody can handle being in the position that he's in, like you said, that defense is decimated. That offense is in a tough spot. They're going to be playing from behind a lot, throwing the ball. He's going to be on the run. And that's a tough situation, especially for a second-year quarterback where you sometimes see regression. So somebody like him who at least can just have a sense of humor and roll with the punches is a guy who you want in that situation. So I like Gardner Minshew too. I'm rooting for him, obviously. And yeah, you gotta stack some quarterbacks in this league, as you can see. I will point out after my little video I shared with my league mates, I'm now affectionately referred to as RVJ. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well deserved. Me and you got everybody on the ropes about Gardner Minshew, and I'm confident that Steve's going to throw a surprise knockout punch right now.
Oh boy, really?
Hey, so Minshew, that's like one of my favorate picks either of you two made.
What? I'm shocked. I thought you were going to hate this pick.
When Ben was texting me and he was available, I mean, I made the best argument I could to be like, grab this guy. It's for several reasons. And I think they're all relatively valid. I mean,
mustache?
So there's all the
number one.
Okay, all right, good.
We don't have to talk about the obvious stuff like the jean shorts,
the jorts and the stash, yeah, all of it, yeah.
Now I have an excuse to wear my jorts, but I digress.
They're in fashion again.
You think about a guy who barely had reps last offseason, who is just thrust into a starting role as a 6th-round rookie draft pick on, a team that's somewhat of a dumpster fire or expected to be one heading into last year. And the fact he was able to, I think, didn't he manage to win 6 games? He made the team a competitive team, and he also was like fantasy relevant. And, he had a handful of top 12 finishes, and what I really like about him heading into this year is he has that experience. The Jaguars defense should just be absolutely terrible. One of the bottom dwellers defensively in the whole league. I expect them to lose a lot of games, be behind in a lot of games. So I think that the volume for him is going to be insane. He did complete over 60% of his passes. He only threw 6 interceptions and 14 starts last year. So he can take care of the football. Ran for 344 yards. Didn't get into the end zone, but we could expect that might change this season. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars used a 2nd round, 42nd overall pick, bringing up big-bodied wide receiver, Chenault Jr., I think his name is, to help out that offense. There's just one more weapon that he has. So he's just one of those guys that I know it doesn't seem sexy whatsoever. Well, I'm not talking about him, of course. I mean, as a fantasy, I mean, as a fantasy option. But I would not be surprised if in this format he's like a low-end quarterback 1, a high-end quarterback 2. And the fact that you're going to start 2 of them and you got him as the 21st quarterback, I love the pick. I'm a big believer in Gardner Minshew.
Wow.
Garbage timing his way to a monstrous fantasy season. So, yeah,
I'm honestly shocked, man. I thought you were going to poo-poo all over this pick. I can't believe we're all on the Gardner Minshew train. I've never been happier.
And again, it's always relative to the price in at QB 21.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, he was always going to be somebody that I thought was a sneaky streamer type this year in a 2 quarterback format like this, with this scoring and all the other aspects we talk about. I mean, it could be a magical Minshew ride in 2020.
And dude, 21's not even like his floor. So I feel like there's no way he finishes, unless he's injured, there's no way he finishes lower than quarterback 21. So great pick. in this
Thank
format.
you.
For sure.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I definitely agree. And if I have to, I'm only going to have 2 quarterbacks. I do plan on. I believe I have ruled out that there's nobody else that I need to have on my roster. I think at the end of this episode, I'm going to be drafting a 3rd quarterback. Next up at the 707 went wide receiver Devontae Parker as my wide receiver 2. In this format in 2019 in points per game, he was wide receiver 18. From week 10 on, he was wide receiver 2 in points per game and wide receiver 13 overall. I like Preston Williams' talent. I know that Devontae saw the uptick once he left, but he is still coming off an ACL this year. Preston Williams, that is. Devontae Parker's fully healthy, and him and Fitzmagic definitely found some magic down the stretch that I expect to spill over into 2020.
Yeah, Devontae Parker was really a late season MVP from last season. Finally came on strong in a big way. So yeah, I mean,
remember when we were arguing whether or not he was worth the 14th round pick? Remember that?
Fine, you were right. I was wrong. You are great. I'm stupid.
I just wanted to ask the question. I didn't need to hear anything.
You're big and important. I'm small and inferior. Is that good?
DJ.
All right. Well, now while all those things are true, Devontae,
about me?
I was just kidding. I was waiting for a reaction. I was like, okay, well maybe no one caught on to that one. Don't leave us, Jay. Devontae Parker, I feel like so a lot's being said about Miami improved their defense. They brought in running backs. They won't throw the ball as much. Preston Williams will be back. The uptick, there's a lot of arguments against Parker. Why he is going, I don't think he'll finish wide receiver 2. That's perfectly fine. He's your 2nd wide receiver. He should probably easily finish as a wide receiver 2 if he's healthy and playing next season, especially there was an uptick, and a lot of people will say, well, he wasn't targeted as much early in the year. Yeah, 3 of his lowest targeted games in the first half of the season was when Josh Rosen was starting, and Rosen favored Preston Williams. So there is just more of a connection with him and Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I think, like you said, Ben, which is a good point, is how they ended last year. A team that was competitive, winning games. They knocked off the Patriots, who needed to win that game. It was a playoff-type atmosphere game in Foxborough that they won last season. And Parker and Fitzpatrick balled out. So it's not far-fetched that Devontae Parker can finish as a wide receiver 2 where you're drafting him. He could finish better than that even. So, I get it. He's not going to have all the volume and do exactly what he did the second half of last year. But that's no reason for people to totally disrespect him the way that he currently is being disrespected in drafts. Just saying.
You're absolutely right. And I am smiling, realizing to myself that by the end of this episode, I'm going to have 3 Miami Dolphins on my team. And I'm going to be happy about it. And that's the funny part to me. But before we get there, we have a little journey to go on. And I know we are at an hour 10 into this podcast, but it's still a journey worth going on. We promised you earlier when Jay got Hayden Hurst at the ridiculous, awful price of the 803, and I got him at the amazing high value price of the 806. It's all you need to say. And so, like I said, let's go on a Hayden Hurst journey. First, we can all agree that it is pretty well known that Hayden Hurst is a superior athlete / pass catcher versus my guy and now Cleveland Browns, Austin Hooper. Do we all 3 agree on that?
Say that again.
Neither of you are listening.
Well, no, I was going to say, as far as a superior athlete, I guess I have to be perfectly honest. I don't know both those guys as like spark scores.
Okay, it's like pretty well known that Hayden Hurst is.
I know Hurst tested really well though.
Yeah, he's more of a pass catcher, high athlete guy. All right, so back to the journey.
Okay.
Last year, theoretically, a lesser talented athlete in Austin Hooper, who I still love. Hoop, don't get upset.
Right?
Hoop.
Yeah.
Hoop was tight end 3 in this format, this Scott Fish format in points per game. From weeks 1 through 10, prior to his injury in this format, he was tight end 2 overall and tight end 1 in points per game. So let's now look at a few efficiency stats for Mr. Hurst and then consider the draft equity paid to acquire him by Atlanta to join them in this explosive offense. So per playerprofiler.com, in yards per reception, 11.6. He was 14th. In yards per target, 8.7. That was 7th. Yards per pass route, 2.44. That was good for number 6. Target quality rating, he was good for 15 in that metric. Catch rate, he was 11th with 75. True catch rate, which that they quantify like catchable balls versus non-catchable balls, things of that nature. He was number 6 at 91%.
Wow.
All you need to do is give this guy an opportunity. And I understand when you got a Mark Andrews in front of him, you do what you got to do. You know, when you see the guy playing the way that he is, and Hayden Hurst had a little bit of injury early on, you know, it is what it is. But Atlanta Falcons know a little bit about football too. They paid a lot to get him. I personally benefited from Austin Hooper and all the great things he did last year. And I think Hayden Hurst has an even better year at the tight end position than Hoop did in 2019.
God, I hope that is the case for both of us. And we both got him pretty much at the exact same spot. I think we're both high on him. I mean, in my opinion, the sky's the limit. I have high expectations for Hayden Hurst. I just hope that I'm not disappointed.
Yeah, it's funny. The more I keep looking at where you guys drafted him, being in this tight end premium format, you know, I'm sitting there thinking like, that's not that much higher than he should probably, in my opinion, go in just a standard redraft league. So it's just kind of amazing. And again, it's just, I don't know, some disrespect. I don't know, maybe it's disrespect. He's just not a sexy pick. And Ben, the more I'm thinking about it now, when you did mention as far as him being a superior athlete, I did read an interview with Matt Ryan that he had recently, and seeing Hayden Hurst in workouts, and you know, and the way he talked about him was, you know, it kind of in the way of, I haven't seen a tight end that's like that can do the things athletically that he can do. So that's definitely, I know that's just like hype speak, but still, you know, it's there. If he can get the targets and he's healthy, and I do believe he gets those targets, like you guys got a steal in the 8th round in this format. I love Hayden Hurst this year.
And that's adding him to what I think is 2 very solid quarterbacks, an outstanding running back core, and so far I've got 2 outstanding wide receivers. And in the 9th round, Jay was very happy about getting PPR stud Jarvis Landry. Got some nice symmetry here where I'm drafting at the 907. I'm taking PPR stud wide receiver Julian Edelman. In this format in 2019, he was wide receiver 8 in points per game. I don't need him to produce anything close to that level to return a positive ROI as my wide receiver 3 on my team. And I do not think that he's going to have a problem being a wide receiver 2, low to mid wide receiver 2 with Cam Newton at the helm. I mean, this guy is high completion. The high percentage completion is written all over Julian Edelman. He's a quarterback's best friend. He can get open anywhere. And I mean, behind the I got the Devontaes leading the helm, Devontae Adam and Devontae Parker, and then you got Julian Edelman behind him as my wide receiver 3. I don't know about you guys, but I was thrilled to get him at the 907.
You know, again, this is a pick that I really hated just because I was so jealous of it. That, you know, like everything you just said, he's a quarterback's dream, and that's what he's been for Tom Brady. And so I don't care if it's Stidham or Cam behind center. We still don't know what Cam's shoulder's like. You know, I assume the due diligence has been done by New England, but, you know, his I don't know how far downfield Cam's going to be throwing the ball and how often it's going to be happening. So I think Julian's going to be the best friend no matter who is under center in New England in that offense. So I think he's going to continue his role as just being that nice safety slot receiver, gathering up plenty of receptions.
Yeah, as your wide receiver 3, definitely a solid pick. You know, he's not going to be doing what he did last season just because Tom Brady's not there. The volume's not going to be there. But as long as he's healthy and on the field, I mean, who do they have to throw the ball to, guys? I mean,
That's it.
and don't people out there, don't give me any N'Keal Harry stuff. I'm sorry. Like, let's wait till that guy. Let's wait till he is something before we try to make him something. All those people in Dynasty that took him at the 101 last year, I bet you're happy with that. Anyways, sorry for anyone that did. I'm sincerely sorry. But yeah, the Edelman pick is. It's a fine. It's one that's not sexy. Brady's gone. Everyone just assumes like, we're gonna trash Edelman. I think in redraft he's not that much higher than where you got him in this draft either, which is insane. So definitely a solid pick.
Yeah, I feel like I got a team of just like hard hat, under the radar, solid producers that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and I'm really excited about my team through 9 rounds. And the excitement ramps up to a whole different level in round 10. Not a lot of people are super excited about this guy. And I don't know how either of you feel about him heading into 2020 either. I haven't talked to you much about him. 10:06, I got running back Jordan Howard as my second flex spot. Few people get disrespected like my guy Jordan Howard. In this format last year, while he played from weeks 1 through 9, that's a pretty good sample size, right? 9 weeks. Well, during the first half of the season, he was RB 15, 1-5. In 2018, the worst full year of his career, he finished as RB 22 in this format. Miami came on down the stretch last year and had an outstanding offseason, including upgrading that offensive line. He's getting all the goal line work and then some. Breida is a complimentary piece. That's nice, but Howard is the man. Lock it up. Another running back 2, solid, nice year for him, and he's my RB4.
Boy, I saw his name there. I saw you picked him, and I heard how excited you were going into this pick, and I'm like, you're gonna have to sell me on Jordan.
Sold, sucker.
Listen, I'm a Jordan Howard guy. Like, we both have been. When he was in Chicago, when he was in Philly, like we've always been high on Jordan Howard, and everyone has dogged him, it seems like. And we've never understood why, because he's been, like you said, a lunch pail kind of guy that just always steadily produces, almost similar to like a Lamar Miller kind of production, where like you get to the end of the season, you look back and you're like, what? He had that kind of production? I had no idea. Yeah. And so, I'll be honest, in my mind, he's like forgotten because he's in Miami. So this probably is a great value pick. Well, I know, but
he's gonna make you remember.
And Matt Breida. Honestly, in my draft, Matt Breida went first. Jordan Howard, I'm sure, is still on the board. So
wrong move.
Right, exactly,
yep.
Steve. How can you trust a guy that can never stay healthy versus a guy who's never hurt and who always produces? So if I'm
preach to him, Steve. Preach to him, Steve.
I was gonna say,
go for
Ben,
it.
You don't need to be sold. Jay, I'm gonna sell you a little bit.
All right, sell me, buddy. I like it.
Similar to you, when I found out he signed with Miami, I was kind of like, gross. Who wants to be the running back on the Dolphins? We saw how that worked out for that crew last year. But then that also got me to thinking, like, well, they had Kalen Ballage, Patrick Laird, Myles Gaskins. I mean, these were some speculative stashes last year, guys, if you remember that. So it was a revolving door at the position. The line is upgraded, and I'm sitting here like looking through goal line touches for the AFC East, and I'm looking at the Dolphins, and I'm like, man, nobody really had a decent amount of goal line touches, but my God, the whole team has. Turns out the 6th most of any unit in the NFL did the Miami Dolphins.
Wow.
So I think instead of 6 different ball carriers getting those touches, I think that can probably be highly consolidated into a majority of those going to none other than Jordan Howard. So with the improved line, the opportunity, he will be the guy who gets the lion's share of the carries in a team that should have a relatively decent offense, actually. In the 10th round, to get a starting running back with that kind of workload it's just he's getting disrespected and overlooked. And again, it's because it's not sexy. I understand that, but we're trying to win fantasy championships. So you take him in the 10th round.
And remember, in this format, this is a starting spot on your roster. This is my second standard flex spot that he is slated to be occupying behind Melvin Gordon. So, I mean, like you guys I love this pick, and he's been somebody that I have been high on all off season. I've always been a Jordan Howard guy, so I've always been able to see the path to success, and I don't think it's a very far reach this year. I really don't. I hope I'll be proven right. I was really excited about my next pick too. Rounding out my starters at the 11:07, wide receiver Golden Tate. He was wide receiver 30 in points per game in this format in 2019. Tate scored 6 touchdowns in 10 games last season from weeks 1 to 16. If that red zone trend continues, that'll be outstanding. But when I projected him for this year, I did a little experiment in this format. I cut his touchdowns last year in half in his sample size. And then I extrapolated those numbers with half of his touchdowns of 10 games over 16. That equated to approximately 80 catches for 1,080 yards and 6 touchdowns. As a flex 3 in my 11th round, I'll take that all day.
You said it best. With a lot of these guys, not a sexy pick, not a glamorous pick, but just a very solid, quiet fantasy producer. And Golden Tate is just that. A guy who probably commonly gets overlooked. He did miss some time last season, which probably, is a reason for that. But yeah, you just another solid pick.
Yeah, Ben, I know we texted a little bit about Golden Tate, and I feel like at this spot again, it's just a great value. And you have Sterling Shepard, who really struggles to be on the field, Evan Ingram,
right,
who really struggles to be on the field, and Tate's role there in the slot, he'll be a best friend to Daniel Jones, who certainly can use best friends in any offense. So I love the pick. It's just really solid, and you need that. And I'd like to say this is just a mental note I just had, kind of like thinking through, because this is new to me too, and this is very, very interesting, the roster makeup and the scoring. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, when you have 21 draft picks and the teams are that deep and you're starting that many players, you think of all the teams that want like the sexy upside players that have a lot higher, outright bust rate. Load up on these types of guys and provide yourself with, because it's a long season. So, build a solid floor for yourself. And that alone is probably going to help you outlast half the teams in your guys' divisions who, like to take the sexy picks left and right. So love the Golden Tate pick this late.
Appreciate it. You got to know your league. And like you said, Steve, with a league this deep, you can't be relying on trades to bail you out. You can't be relying on the waiver wire to bail you out. You really have to rely on the quality of your roster top to bottom to be able to really depend on for production all season long. And like you said, it is a long season. The next 4 picks I have are all on my bench, the 1206, 1307, 1406, and I will be making the 1507 pick live at the end of this podcast. And at the 1206, the first spot on my bench in a tight end premium league, almost every other viable tight end was gone. And this is what our guy Steve would call a speculative stash. I am totally content to rely on Hayden Hurst all season. But Ian Thomas is now the tight end on the Carolina Panthers, with a quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater coming to town that I expect to target the tight end around 70 plus times. In this tight end premium format, this guy could prove flex worthy. Forget about being Hayden Hurst's bye week or tough matchup week. This guy could have some standalone value in an 11 team roster all his own.
You know what? He's on my list to also draft here coming up. So I'm a few rounds behind you right now in the draft, and he's definitely on my list. I think that's a great pick, like you said. Being the tight end now in that offense to a guy who likes to check down is a great formula.
Oh yeah, I am definitely an Ian Thomas guy this season. As far as like a late round flyer, guy that you could throw a dart at, or at the very least, make sure he's on your watch list to pick up after week 1 if you see he gets a fair amount of targets. Like, another thing for me is I think Carolina, they they don't have a defense. And it's just going to be a team that Teddy Bridgewater, they're going to have to throw more than most teams in the NFL. It's just force. It's what they're going to have to do. And he is the tight end there now. And we're talking about a quarterback who does like to take care of the ball. It's a quality that Teddy Bridgewater has, and he's not going to force anything downfield. So you could see Ian Thomas, just gobbling up targets there over the middle, short stuff. But I mean, in this format, with a tight end premium, it's great.
Yeah, and I don't have to rely on him at all. That's the beauty of it. If I see some other tight end emerging somewhere else, I cut him and I move on. I feel like I have to qualify my next pick a little bit because I do have Zeke Elliott. He was my first pick, and I could have went Tony Pollard and handcuffed myself to him. Number one, Zeke is super durable. Number two, with him being diagnosed with COVID and not having any discernible problems so far, that actually gives me a higher level of confidence in his season-long durability. I'm not a doctor. I could be wrong, but I just feel like having it at this point and kicking it and being it over with and maybe having the antibodies to it is better than not. I don't know. We'll see. But I ended up going at the 1307 with Latavius Murray because, number one, in a league this deep, I feel like Murray is more flex worthy in this format than Pollard is because for running backs, it's half PPR. Pollard makes his hay on those receptions. He doesn't get that goal line work. Whereas Latavius in that offense does get goal line work because he had his red zone carries last year. He was 25th in the league in red zone attempts last year. He had 29 per playerprofiler.com. So number one, he's standalone flex worthy on the right matchup. If it's going to be a game where you expect the Saints to be ahead the whole time and they're just going to pound the ball, that is a Latavius Murray type of week. And if Kamara misses any time whatsoever, he will absolutely feast. Latavius Murray got two. That's right, just 2 chances to lead the Saints backfield in 2019. In that 2-week span, all he did was turn in the best running back performance in the NFL.
I can't argue with that.
bench, just stacking it up.
Right.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the better, I guess, quote unquote, handcuff running backs, especially since, like you said, Ben, in certain matchups, he's certainly worth a flex play. And you talk about durability of Zeke Elliott, like Alvin Kamara, he's not he cannot carry a monstrous workload, and he's going to be, I think, a little more prone to injury just because of his build in the NFL. And yeah, like you said, Ben, he could definitely go off. And the Saints, people always think the Saints is, they're Drew Brees. They throw the ball a ton. They're a pass-first team. That's not really the case. I mean, last season, they were just middle of the road as far as, pass plays versus run plays. Like they weren't a pass-heavy team whatsoever. They're just average, very well-balanced team. So, both of those guys can get, Kamara and Murray can definitely both get some play for sure.
Well, and I think the reason why I really like this pick is what you did with your first 3 picks at running back obviously was very solid, and then you brought in Jordan Howard as just a nice fill-in for bye weeks or what have you, will give you nice, steady, solid production, hopefully. And then, to round it out, to really give you a full complement in your running back stable, you go with an elite cuff, and then, next, a high upside rookie.
Absolutely. 1406, just like Jay did a couple rounds sooner, running back Antonio Gibson in a league that is so deep, you have to anticipate who those top waiver guys in your typical formats could potentially be. And in that category of a potential top waiver ad, Antonio Gibson's right up there at the top of the list, man. I mean, like we said, he could be somebody who primarily makes his hay as a slot receiver, or he could end up being the primary target and usage guy out of that backfield. Either way, in the 14th round as a bench flyer, I love it.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm high on him. I just hope it really works out. I hope I hope that we have football and get to see it. But
You stop it.
Yeah, guys, Gibson definitely has some upside, and I think we've all learned through the years, in formats where you're getting any kind of reward for receptions, if you have a running back who is like a clearly defined, at the very least, a third down role, like Chris Thompson in his heyday in Washington, it's even if Gibson doesn't end up like getting the job and it's AP's out of there on third downs, and I have a feeling that Washington will, they'll be in third and long probably a lot more than most teams in the NFL. So, I think he's somebody that I think at worst case scenario he'll find himself in a role that in leagues where you get some kind of scoring for receptions, he'd be worth a flex certain weeks. Like if you needed to, you'd have him, like good depth piece with upside.
Yeah, nice.
And like we said during Jay's coverage of Antonio Gibson, Dane Brugler calls him a broken tackle machine. So if he gets the ball in open space and he can juke some guys, break some tackles, like, it could be some big play city, some nice flex value. And we already talked about him. I am going to live on this podcast officially make my QB3 and my third Miami Dolphin on my team at the 1507. Ryan Fitzmagic, baby.
Boom.
Just like you said, Steve. So boom, submit draft pick live on this podcast in the 15th round. Nerf Toys division. Proceed with the draft because now I have just stopped the hour-long wait. And I've been pretty good this whole time, but I needed to do a little bit of side research to make sure there weren't any gems out there that I was passing up. But, we talked about it with Minshew and with Tannehill. There are going to be some weeks where they're not the best start in the world. And we all agree that a sneaky team on the rise right now is the Dolphins.
Yeah.
And in a COVID offseason with the Tua injury, with that clearly being their long-term investment, they have every reason to wait. And if Fitzmagic just gives them further incentive to do that by winning games and playing well, I mean, all the more reason just to let him ride out the year.
Yep. Well, hey, nice short episode, just like I called.
Yeah, good job with that.
Thanks.
So since it's been such a long episode, do you want to give everybody an update on our mock draft polls from last week and pay off on our promise to post a poll to crown the winner from our mock draft episode last week?
I sure
And while
would.
he's pulling that up,
yes,
at the end of all of this, when Jay and I have each completed our 22-round mock, we do plan on from the main Foresight account to post both of our complete rosters, the full makeup, by round, exactly where we were drafting out of and when we picked who. We're going to then give everybody an opportunity to grade us A, B, C, D, F, whatever you think. We want the honest feedback.
Yeah.
But I really think we took this scoring format to heart. I think both of our rosters demonstrate some good flexibility, some good research, and I'm excited to see how they shape out, and I'm excited to see how we do in this thing.
All right, so the update, here we go. We had this broken down. We did a 12-team PPR draft last week, and we put it to a vote on Twitter as to who would be the finalist to determine who had the best mock draft. The winner of Group 1 between Team CNC, Team Saquon, and Team Zeke was Team CMC, also known as Foresight Ben. In Group 2, between Team Michael Thomas, Team Derrick Henry, and Team Alvin Kamara, the winner, Team Alvin Kamara, also known as Foresight J. Boom, 2 for 2. In Group 3, we had Team Cook against Team Nook against Team Chud. Chud.
That's what the name of that group should have been.
Yeah.
Chud
And
team.
the winner, really the tightest group of all of them, Team Cook takes it, also known as Foresight Doc. Doc picks up the win, advancing to the finals. And in our final group, with the most votes of any group between Team Julio, Team Freak, and Team Adams, Steve suffers a tight loss. I take it back. This is by far the most competitive group in the competition.
Sure. Yeah.
Team Julio wins with 45%. Adams with 35%. Team Freak with 20%.
Any one of these teams could have beaten Group 3.
The group with the most votes, hotly contested. I know there were Twitter campaigns to get votes going. It was a hot one. That was really the most competitive group in this competition so far. So Team Julio moving on to the finals. We will post the final bracket tonight and start that poll, so be sure to go out and vote.
Absolutely. And we want to let everybody know that as long as none of the negativity that Jay is alluding to comes to pass, our intent on this podcast is now to move to a 2 times a week format as we move into preview season, where, if you're not familiar, we go division by division, and one episode we will combine the quarterbacks and running backs together, and the next episode we'll combine the wide receivers and tight ends, and we start with the AFC East and work all the way to the NFC South, and with one of the most exciting divisions for last. And so it'll be Wednesday nights and Saturday mornings. Wednesday nights will be with the 3 of us. Saturday mornings will be with just me and Jay. You'll get the deep voice coffee version of the podcast. And we're super excited about it. So either one of you guys got anything else to say before we get out of here tonight?
I am excited for preview season, man.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that, guys. And I do want to say, since we are here, I want to document this live. I have a feeling you guys are going to do pretty well in your Scott Fishbowl divisions. I really do like the strategy of waiting on quarterback instead of seeing those runs and passing up on a lot of other solid players, because we know how volatile the position is as a whole. And so I'm really hoping that actually happens, because I just said it out loud.
Hey,
with all my years of experience in the Scott Fishbowl.
Well, hey.
I appreciate it, man. It's been a lot of fun to be in it so far, and I can't wait to finish the draft and hopefully go through a Scott Fishbowl season.
Yeah, exactly. And I know I speak for Ben. We're both very excited to be in the competition, and really more excited to hopefully make the playoffs and contend, man. Wouldn't that be great? So here we go.
Yes, sir. And next time we're back with you, it'll be Wednesday night, so not even a full week, and we'll be talking about the quarterbacks and the running backs, including Jordan Howard, of the AFC East. Can't wait.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We thank you for joining us. Be sure to visit us, as always, at fantasyforesight.com. Use the links at the bottom of the page to find us across social media, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you pod. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.
I was just trying to give a little Jordan Howard love.